the air nimbly and sweetly recommends itself unto our gentle senses. This most excellent canopy the air, look you, this brave o'erhanging firmament, this majestical roof fretted with golden fire. Why, it appears no other thing to me but a foul and pestilent congregation of vapors.
For over a century, hundreds of thousands in Britain have suffered from asthma and bronchitis. The air they breathe has become their enemy.
Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendor hung aloft the night, and watching with eternal lids apart, like nature's patient, sleepless eremite, the moving waters at their priest-like task of pure ablution round earth's human shores.
The air, the sea, and the land are being cursed by the poisons that we ourselves have created.
Little drops of water, little grains of sand, make the mighty ocean and the pleasant land.
You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly.
These are the perils that we have made. Can we now control them? We demand more and more of everything. We have become greedy. We must control ourselves if we are to save our environment. Some of the poisons we can see, smell, even taste. And some of them are polluting the world almost unnoticed. We're only aware of it when it's too late. Once we thought we'd solve the world food problems by inventing insecticides, pesticides, artificial fertilizers. Then, too late, we discovered they had other unforeseen effects. Soil, once poisoned, stays that way a long time. The vegetation absorbs it, the insects absorb it, the birds and the small creatures absorb it. Then the predators come. A kestrel has only to eat 7 mice that have eaten grain containing DDT, and it dies. Every living creature has absorbed DDT in some degree. Several million tons of it fill the biosphere. DDT is almost indestructible. It can't be broken down and excreted. So it goes on, up the food chain, and the balance of our environment is destroyed. And yet DDT has helped to eradicate malaria, which beset over half the world's population only 15 years ago. How do we balance the good against the bad? We need chemical fertilizers, but when they are leached into the rivers, they nourish the weeds and the algae. In time, all the oxygen is used up, resulting in the death of fish and other water creatures. Already 1,000 miles of our rivers have been so polluted by industrial wastes that no life survives in the waters.
My father tells me that in the old days it was possible to walk across the backs of salmon on this river. Now I know this river pretty well, you see, because I was brought up on the river. Insomuch as I spent many years from being a kid until I went into the armed forces, sailing, in fact swimming in the river. And with this in mind, I decided it was time that my daughter learned to use a boat. So we went down to the river. Now remember, I was thinking of the river of old. In fact, I've drunk many a gallon of this water. Now, what happened to us, we got down there, it was full tide. So no problem at all. In goes the craft, in goes my daughter, and away we go. Now, we're out for something like 2 hours. Now, when we got back, this is the thing, when we got back, the tide was down. You've seen nothing like it. We were close to a sewer outlet, and there was everything floating around in there. And because the tide was down, I got covered right up to the top of my trousers in SH1T. This was the pure floating around in the water.
And it's not just the pure. Chemicals, oils, toxic materials, radioactive waste, garbage, detergent, all are pushed into the rivers. If you fall in, you're more likely to be poisoned than drowned. Our environment is treated as a great dumping area. Here, more than 70% of the underwater species have died because of the coal waste thrown out exactly as it was over a century ago, because it's cheap and easy that way. Almost every beach in this country is slimy with sewage or blotched with oil. Not surprising when some 500,000 tons of crude oil are still dumped every year illegally into the sea. And the main cause is our unthinking greed. Most of these hazards can be avoided. We have a decision to make, and also a price to pay. Until now, only disaster has shocked us into action. When giant tankers first appeared, the oil companies might have been prepared. Instead, 100,000 tons of crude oil went into the sea here, and no one really knew how to cope. And this wasn't all. The detergents used did more harm to the sea life than the oil. But no one knew this then. Today there is a safe dispersal agent. But why hadn't research produced it long ago? We had grown fond of our pea supers. They gave London an identity, a personality. Almost every year, London disappeared into a soupy, sulphurous smog. Then came December 1952. And 4,000 died in 3 days, literally suffocating to death. And as a direct result of this, the clean air laws were created. But too late for 4,000 people. We are victim and culprit, both. This is northeast England in 1970. 14 years after the Clean Air Act became law. The more the chimneys belched out their filth, the more the prosperity of the nation could be seen and therefore believed. Every year, 900,000 tons of smoke are released, and today this is mainly from domestic chimneys. The rain and the wind carry the soot far afield. For 700 years, coal was the main source of air pollution. It was the cheapest fuel and the dirtiest. Now look at London.
The city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare. Ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie, open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air.
So it is possible to clean up a century-old mess. Since 1956, 80% of the smoke in London has vanished into thin, clear air. The sun can now reach the heart of London, warming the air, keeping it moving, turbulent, blowing away the poisons, the smells, the dust. Remember how hard it was to grow anything but dull laurel and dreary privet? Today, the flowers have returned to London.
her that wastes her time and me, that now she knows, when I resemble her to thee, how sweet and fair she seems to be.
Never has London seen so many roses, but a rose conceals something much more harmful than the sharpest thorn. In London, you don't need to spray your roses against fungus. The air is one vast fungicide. The insidious gas, sulfur dioxide, kills the fungus that feeds on the rose. We have almost stopped the visible menace of smoke in London, but still do little about the invisible poison of sulfur dioxide. Every day, all over Britain, 1,200 measurements are taken, and we know that about 6 million tons of sulfur dioxide are pumped into the air every year. Although it's accepted that sulfur dioxide has become a major pollutant, it is argued that as yet there is no cause for concern.
But in actual fact, this is far from being the case. The trouble is that what people can't see, they're not particularly frightened of. And sulfur dioxide pollution is still increasing, not only in some of our cities, but over our countryside as a whole. And if one goes into the parks of our towns today, one finds that the trees in general are covered with a green scum, either of algae or of a peculiar little grey powdery lichen like this one. And this is one of the few species of lichen that appear able to tolerate air pollution. 100 years ago, a number of very handsome lichens were still quite common, even round such places as Manchester and Burton-on-Trent. A lichen like this, for example, was at that time quite frequent in woodlands. Today, it's almost confined to the extreme west of England and Wales, with a few outliers in places like the New Forest.
But who are the actual culprits? Look at one small part of England. This isn't an industrial area. There are no dark satanic mills here.
This is one of the country's 2 large areas for making bricks. The brick earth has quite a high oil content that allows bricks to be made quite cheaply. Unfortunately, the brick earth also contains both sulfur and fluorine compounds. The fluorine falls down around the works as a fine rain of dust particles. In the burning process, the sulfur is oxidized first to sulfur dioxide and then eventually washed out of the atmosphere in rainwater to form sulfuric acid. In other circumstances, we use sulfuric acid to kill off vegetation.
I have farmed in the brickyard area for a number of years, in and around the chimneys, and have had to leave because the smoke fumes were so injurious to the cattle. The cattle are susceptible to these fumes, and of course they go very thin, and I have seen the teeth of animals fall out, and some of these poor animals that we've had to have destroyed, when you feel the bones, they're so brittle and soft that you can rub them up with your fingers.
We as householders know what happens. Our houses need repainting every 2 or 3 years. Our wire fences rot, and if we're gardeners, the leaves of some of our flowers turn brown at the tips, particularly gladioli or irises and sometimes roses. It looks like frost, but we know what it is.
If you can smell the stuff, it's doing damage. I have been asked if I knew what the margin of tolerance was for these young leaves to this aerial sewage that falls on them. And really, as a practical forester, my opinion is that there is no margin of tolerance. We have a great number of stag-headed oaks here that have become stag-headed, not by any means because of over-maturity, but in my opinion, largely because of aerial pollution.
We can see what happens to the trees, we know what happens to cattle, but we want to know what happens to us.
These voices see the brickworks as the menace. In other parts of the country, it's a lime works or an oil refinery, or a power station, or the local steel works, or some other form of industry. All these have been accused of spreading corrosive and irritant and dangerous gases. So there's been a move recently to build tall chimneys. The idea is to release the plumes so high into the atmosphere that it throws the effluent above what is called the temperature inversion level. In a temperature inversion, the layers of hot and cold air are reversed. The air near breathing level gets chilled, while a layer of warm air forms like a blanket above the city, trapping all the pollutants. The people underneath have to breathe the contaminated, loaded atmosphere until the weather changes and the winds blow it away. Tall chimneys throw their plumes high above this layer of warm air, but the effluent must come down somewhere. And even the tallest chimneys could just be spreading the pollution far into the countryside and onto the hilltops at their own level. You can't see sulfur dioxide, but it behaves just like this.
Well, every day we get this smoke coming over, and it gets into the house. You rub the tables and they're all red. I have a little white dog, and he's mostly pink.
You're forever outside doing your paintwork and inside paintwork. It comes into the house. And if I see it coming out, I have to dash out and get me washing in. You know, at least with living over the road, I can see it coming out.
There's 2 hospitals just in the vicinity. And when the wind's blowing in that area, you can just picture what those hospitals will be like.
And what it's doing to our health, I don't know. Our lungs must be coated with this red stuff. I feel terribly strongly about it, as the people do, I think, mostly.
Well, I think it's high time that there was something done about it, because it's an absolute disgrace.
If sulfur dioxide looked like this, we'd soon do something about it. And it is more destructive than the red dust. It eats away metal, stone, and cement. The total price of pollution is £400 million a year. Most ridiculous of all, sulfur is valuable. We import the stuff. Heavy fuel oil is one of the main sources of sulfur dioxide pollution. It's used to heat many office blocks, high-rise flats, factories. These heavy grades of oil are a problem. The lighter oils contain less sulfur, but they are too expensive to use. The oil and coal companies and government research establishments devote a great deal of time and money to trying to solve this economic puzzle. What alternatives are there? Nuclear energy? Imagine London powered by this new type of fuel, only a dream for the immediate future, for the problems are enormous. The other alternative is gas. Old-style town gas has a minimal sulfur content and no smoke problem. But historically, its record hasn't been all that clean. Nitrogen peroxide helped to poison the atmosphere. Ammonia was discharged into the rivers. The gas itself was deadly if badly used. But by using a light oil distillate for making gas, at least the major airborne poisons have been eradicated. But suddenly, nature and man cooperated to pull off together a unique victory. From the bottom of the North Sea, natural gas is being pumped out to fuel homes, power stations, and industries. It's a powerful fuel, and like any other, needs careful handling. But it is, at the moment, the only truly clean fuel available.
It mustn't be thought, of course, that we can do without coal and oil. They are all very important fuels. But the introduction of natural gas is very exciting to people who, like myself, who work in this field of air pollution. In 10 square miles of industrial Sheffield is more fuel burnt than any other comparable area in a city of Europe. This is not to say, of course, that all the pollution came from industry. It's been well known for many years that pollution, in the main part, was from the domestic chimney. It must be remembered that the habit of coal burning is ingrained in our people, and it's rather difficult to break a habit of many generations. Nonetheless, we've had cooperation both from industry and from the general public, and with natural gas coming in, we can confidently look forward to the future. New horizons are opening up. They were always there, but now they can be seen.
Natural gas has another advantage too. It's dug deep into the land, which quickly heals. No ugly pylons, and no road tankers to jam even tighter the already packed roads of Britain. It is now thought that exhaust fumes cause accidents through loss of alertness and concentration. But which particular poison actually causes the trouble? No one knows. We do know it isn't carbon monoxide. But are so many additives necessary in petrol? Or are we just playing with death for the sake of better performance? These houses are being spattered with millions of minute drops of soot and dust.
And I will show you something different from either your shadows at morning striding behind you, or your shadows at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust.
But what about the particles that are collecting in the atmosphere? Particles from the aircraft, the oil-burning furnaces of industry, from so many other sources. Particles of ash and dust. Is the dust acting as a shield between us and the sun? Will the temperature of the Earth drop, and will we enter a new ice age? Or have we set up a kind of glass house around the world, made up of carbon dioxide, which, like glass, allows the short waves of the sun to come in, but traps the longer waves of heat reflected from the Earth? So will the planet get warmer, the ice caps melt, and half the world drown? Fantasy or reality? Who can judge? But who can afford to ignore it? Once started, the process could be irreversible. This is no fantasy. This is the real nightmare of today, and of tomorrow if we don't act now. In America, a woman has up to 10 times as much DDT in her milk as the government permits to a cow. In Tokyo, if a policeman directs traffic for 20 minutes or more, he must pump his lungs clean or wear a respirator. In Lake Erie, 240 miles long, 60 miles wide, all life is disappearing, except for sludge worms and a mutant form of carp that has learned to feed on poison. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. Some have forecast the end of the world like this, but it need not be so. Research in universities, industries, and government laboratories is being done on every kind of pollution. But to make this research work is our choice, our problem. In the history of the world, modern man occupies only a tiny part of time. But he has done more harm in that moment than all those that went before. Now we must face the task ahead, for at last we have met our enemy, and he is us.